Hey Guru Nation, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, comment, share. Look, it means a lot to me. A lot of you guys and gals from within the industry, and even at the site level, honestly, are confused about database. What is the difference between a patient database from your PI's private practice and from your research clinic's database? Those are two very different things. Now, I recommend every site should have a practicing physician that's a PI or a sub-I. You need a place where you're going to get referrals. You need a real world pool of patients that a provider has credibility with. It just makes it a lot easier. Otherwise, if you don't have this private practice database, you have to build your own research clinic database. And yes, that is hard. And yes, that is expensive. Shout out to my sponsor, 1N Health. While they don't work with sites directly, if you're lucky enough to be on one of their studies, sponsors have to pay them. They've saved one of my studies recently. We build our database. Those were free referrals we got. So let me explain the difference between a private practice database and a research site database. And when it comes to feasibility, obviously you want to put your best foot forward when you're completing these feasibility surveys. But you need to also understand realistically and let the sponsor know realistically what that means. Because sponsors are confused as well because sites don't have proper definitions for these things. And I don't know if these are the right definitions, but these are my definitions. And this is what makes sense to me. Your private practice, whether it's one physician or dozens of physicians, have their own database. These are usually stored in EMR of some sort, whether it's eClinicalWorks. There's all kinds. The PIs I work with use eClinicalWorks. Okay, my site is an add-on business to their existing private practice. My site, Yuma Clinical Trials, is an add-on to their private practice. Separate company. We do have access to their EMRs for the purposes of pre-screening. So when I fill out a feasibility form and a sponsor's asking me how many patients in your database, right? Now I can interpret that a number of ways. How many patients in my database or how many patients in my PI's private practice, which is his database. So when it comes to feasibility, I'm putting the bigger number. All right, I'm letting you sponsors know how this works. But, so let's say I put 10,000 patients down, because it's actually true. My PI, his database, he employs 9 other providers in Yuma, and they have about 10,000 patients in their database. Now, what is in my research clinic database is very different. But it's easier to build my database as a research clinic site if I have a bigger database from my PI's private practice. So, who ends up in my database as a research site? I use Creo, by the way, for my eSource, eReg. It also holds my database for my site. Anytime I pre-screen someone on paper, even if I don't talk to the patient, and I think, hey, this patient may qualify, I put them in my database, Creo, so that either myself or one of my staff members can contact that patient, preferably immediately, but more than likely when we need to drum up some recruitment activity. So, not all 10,000 patients from my PI's database make it to my research database. When a patient actually screens and enrolls in a study, That's already in my database because those patients were already in there, most likely, because I pre-screened them for my PI's private practice. However, when I get an outside referral, whether I'm running a newspaper ad or our efforts through social media, we're investing a lot in content creation on Instagram and YouTube for Yuma clinical trials, and I get a lead that comes to my landing page. I immediately put them in my patient database, not my PI's database, my database. So I can build my database separately from my PI's database, but my PI's database definitely helps. So I know it's confusing, it's tricky. A lot of you guys on the high level, you don't understand the stuff, you think it's one and the same. It's not one and the same. If I call a patient who already did a study of mine, because I have another study for the same indication that they might qualify for, and this patient had a great experience or even a good experience at my site, they're much more likely to join my new study because they know me, they've been through the process before. That is a more valuable number than someone who I've never talked to that is buried in my PI's private practice EMR. Okay, because first of all, I've never talked to them. They don't know what clinical research is. I need to educate them more. They may no longer even be seen by my PI. Even that is better than a stranger that happened to have seen one of our ads. All right, so the hierarchy of the leads, the quality of the leads goes from really good, like had a great experience in my previous study, would do another study again, 10 out of 10, to my PI's private practice that I've never seen, but hopefully my PI or the sub-PI or somebody has enough influence to where they can get the patient in. That's great. That's probably a 6 out of 10 as far as quality of leads. And then a stranger who saw an Instagram ad and just got curious. All right, maybe that's a 3 out of 10. There's an even lower hierarchy. It's when one of these recruitment vendors, I just shouted out One N Health, but when one of these recruitment vendors posts an ad that doesn't even have our site as a brand, right? It has the third party as a brand. Those are maybe 1 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. But because oftentimes sponsors are paying for those leads, like with One N Health, and they are free for the site should contact every single one of them. And one of the things I learned from somebody just the other day is speed to lead. He runs a patient recruitment agency. As soon as that lead comes through, someone's got to call them, like within 10 minutes. And then someone's got to follow up with them like 4, 5, 6 times a day for that first week, because that's a hot lead. If you just let it sit there in the portal and the dashboard, remember, these are strangers, all right? So on the hierarchy of quality of leads, these are like at the bottom. You can take a 1 out of 10 as far as quality of leads and make them a 10 out of 10 by speed to lead, calling them quickly, giving them an excellent experience in a clinical trial. That 1 out of 10 just became a 10 out of 10 for your future studies. So sites have every incentive to address these leads properly. But when it comes to these feasibility surveys, this is why there's so much ambiguity and why we never have proper projections. Because sites are using, myself included, hypothetical numbers, because every site's basically doing this to look good on the feasibility survey. So 10,000 patients in our database. Well, what it boils down to is, let's say it's a hypertension study. In our last hypertension study, we randomized 11 patients. We screened 22. Something like that. We really only have 11 10 out of 10 leads, right? Assuming all 11 had excellent experience, which at my site, I hope they did. We have another 11, so maybe we have 22 that are at least know about research and are willing to try because they've come in and they've signed a consent form. Doesn't mean they're all going to qualify. So that's 22. Then let's say for my PI's private practice of 10,000 patients total, the ones with hypertension, let's be generous and say 600. From those 600, my staff has to pre-screen them on paper, and then someone's got to call them or ask the provider to call and talk to them and follow up with them. You're lucky to get 30 referrals from the providers if you're following up with them properly and if you do the hard work of pre-screening. From those 30, probably only 10 would consider the study. From those 10, probably only 5 would actually come in. From those 5, maybe only 2 of them qualify. So you just took a 10,000 patient database and you ended up with 2 patients. This is why we need to invest in content marketing, content branding for sites. We're going to discuss this at SOS, saveoursites.com. This is why we need more vendors like 1N Health. Shout out to 1N Health. I wish they provided services for sites, but it would be so expensive. These leads are not cheap. This is why you sites need to start investing in building your own brands. And this is why you sites need to start treating your patients right. One thing I forgot to mention, those patients that have been in your study that have had good experiences, don't be afraid to ask them for referrals. So, in a nutshell, this is the difference between a PI's database and a site's database. Both are important. This is where the external vendors come into play, like 1N Health. Shout out to them. They're the best ones by far. And then this is where building the foundation for a content marketing and content branding strategy that the site owns is so important and something that you have to invest in. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Hopefully this helps clarify some stuff. Bye-bye.